So I'm here with Ryan Mason. Ryan is a second-year graduate student from Oklahoma State University. He's in the College Student Development program there, and he's writing a thesis, and his work is really around social media and higher education and student affairs. And Ryan's in a critical issues class, sort of critical issues in student development in higher ed class, and he asked me to come on and just go over some questions that he had around social media. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Ryan here, and we're just going to go to town and answer some questions about social media and higher ed. So Ryan, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I'm glad you wore orange today. It's important that you and I match. And I know you at Oklahoma State, you're at an OSU. I'm a graduate of Oregon State University, another OSU.
Yep.
And we both happen to have the same colors. So it's perfect, man. Way to go.
And we're both worried about this whole Syracuse patenting or trademarking orange thing.
Trademarking of orange, exactly. I don't know how I'm going to own gold. Gold, the color gold is mine. I don't know. I mean, it's sort of ridiculous. And Clemson, I know Clemson's really worried about that as well. And it'll be interesting to see how that sort of pans out.
Yeah, I mean, because there go half our football cheers.
Right, exactly. Or I mean, my whole wardrobe from graduate school is nothing but orange. It's great for Halloween, but I don't know what I'll do later on. So Ryan, you sent me a bunch of different questions, and I'm going to just let you fire away and ask me the questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. And if I don't know the answer, I'll just let you know, man. There's a lot of folks out there that know a ton of stuff about this topic, so I'm really excited for you. I think this is going to be a fun project.
All right, good deal. And I'm just going to fire away and going to start off with a couple of general questions. Some are restating obvious points, about yourself with your background, but again, it's part of a class project, so I just kind of wanted to get all those background type things, and I'm going to be taking a couple of notes here while we're doing the interview. But to start off, I just wanted to get, your background and experience with social media specifically.
Well, I guess my background with social media, my experience, I would say this, my initial social media entry point would have been blogging. Back in 2004, when I started my graduate program at Oregon State University, that's when I got into blogging, that first year of grad school. And I created the blog initially as sort of a place to house information for a Student Affairs Technology Workshop series that I put together. And it just kind of became the place where I started sharing thoughts, putting in my papers that I'd written, and then I started getting comments. And then sort of overnight, there I was in the social media space. And it was around the same time, 2004, maybe early 2005, when I got onto Facebook and started using it, because once they opened it up to other campuses.
Everybody.
Exactly. And so started, playing around with Facebook, and so I'd say my entry point into social media was via my personal blog, which was connected to graduate school, because it was also the delivery mechanism for my final capstone project, which was my portfolio for grad school, because it just seemed like the obvious thing to do was to put this information online and then share it with folks and have my committee comment on my reflection pieces.
Okay, excellent. And since then, what have you gone on to do with social media? You're a consultant for higher ed and things of that nature. So how did one thing lead to another?
Well, you got about 5 hours for this story, I'm assuming.
It's the short version.
Exactly, the elevator. It's the Sears Tower elevator talk.
All right.
Well, I've always been interested in technology, interested in communications. My undergraduate degree is from Northern Iowa. It's in communications, PR, and I did a minor in marketing. This has sort of been something that just felt natural to me. So it was going from the static web to the social web and getting involved in all these different ways of communicating with people, using Facebook, getting onto Twitter in 2007, keeping my blog going. I mean, I've been blogging now for almost 7 years, which feels like an eternity. And now I'm writing professionally.
Technology terms.
It's like in dog years, I'm 110 years old. And then I write professionally for InsideHigherEd.com. And I do this show, Student Affairs Live, on the HigherEdLive.com network. And in terms of my consulting, I work with schools all over the place in terms of strategic communications, I think would be the umbrella. In terms of what I do, it could be anything from search engine optimization, social media communications, web analytics, crisis communications, integrating mobile into the conversation. So it's a combination of student affairs, communications, and technology, which has sort of been my passion / interest area since day one.
Okay.
And so right now I work with higher ed associations. I've worked with ACPA, I've done some stuff with NASPA, NACIS, NACADA. I'm giving a featured talk at Akuho at their annual conference in July, giving some webinars. So yeah, I'm definitely all over the space right now in terms of using social, both sort of professionally for what I do to get the word out about my work, and at the same time to assist my clients in what their needs are.
Okay. All right. Moving on to the next thing is, you kind of touched on a few points, but separate from social media, what's your experience in student affairs? How did you want to take your experience with technology and communications and apply it to the the higher ed and student affairs track?
Well, I think student affairs is sort of notorious for not necessarily being a sort of professional culture of folks who are tech savvy. It's not part of our curriculum at the graduate level. It's not something you see a lot of times. For example, my guest this week for Student Affairs Live was Leslie Dare. Leslie is the Director for Student Affairs Technology at NC State. You don't see a lot of positions like that across the country. There are a few. There's also a few units out there that have sort of Director of Communications for Student Affairs, which could include the marketing, the social media aspect.
Yeah.
And it just, for me, it just felt like, as practitioners, we do event management, we do student development work, and the technology aids us in what we do. And it just felt as sort of the natural extension to the work that I was doing when I was at the University of Illinois at Chicago, for example, doing work with student development services and wellness recreation services. I was creating the website, creating content, shooting video, putting up images, and just things that felt natural to me. And at the time, people would say that these things were sort of high tech, but it just, in the business world, everyone was doing this, so it wasn't any sort of outside the box thing. It just was not necessarily something that we saw in higher ed a lot at the time.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, fill in the hole.
Yeah, I think, because one of your questions I know that's coming up is the idea of, who is doing the best with Facebook or with social media in certain areas, and I think right now it's almost sort of ubiquitous, right? It's just It's like asking who is using chalkboards in their classrooms. Well, everybody is. Everybody's using a form of technology for learning because it just becomes the norm. It's sort of like the telephone. I mean, the telephone is something that is woven throughout the fabric of our lives. We don't even think about it anymore. It's the cell phone. It's a few folks still have hard lines, especially in our offices.
Yep.
But it's the norm. It's not anything outside of the box. It's not the chrome that sort of makes the car look pretty. It's the part of the engine that makes the car run.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, so going back to social media, what do you see as the pertinent points of the the history of social media as it relates to student affairs, and then the evolution of social media? And again, this is something we could talk about for 5 hours, but elevator speech.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the initial conversation in student affairs with regards to social media was all around legal issues. Legal issues, and is this a space that we're supposed to be in? I think those 2 points came up most often initially. It was this is the space where the students reside. We're not supposed to be there, because at the time, especially with Facebook, it was largely dominated by students because it was restricted only to higher education folks, and staff, faculty in that space were in the minority at the time. And the other part was obviously the legal issue of what are students posting, how does it affect what they're doing with regards to things like student conduct issues. So those were the entry points, the early on history of sort of student affairs folks thinking about it. You'd go to a NASPA or an ACPA conference, and it was how to set up a Facebook account. It was how to get your Facebook profile going. Those were sort of the beginnings of folks in student affairs learning about social media.
Okay. And then what do you see as kind of the evolution? And again, this is student affairs higher ed is one of those things that's a little bit slower to grasp onto new technologies and integrate them. But what do you see as a direction that social media can take in student affairs?
Well, I guess the example I would use is Google, because we don't say we're going to search for something, we say we're going to Google something. And at some point when Facebook now has, I think, over 600 million users, and Twitter is over 200 million, and blogs have become, we've gone all the way to people saying that blogs are going away, and that like RSS is going away, which is sort of like saying it was here, the critical mass of people didn't even know about it, and now it's going to go away, which probably isn't going to happen. And so I think it's going to become the sort of thing where social media with student affairs will just become part of our toolkit. It will become just like when you're on someone's resume where they say that they're fluent with MS Office and Outlook and basic web browsing or email or whatever people are putting on the resume with regards to technology. They'll put that on there now. They'll just say, I am fluent with creating a Facebook page, and not just creating it, but managing that community, leading that community, sort of being a community manager. I am fluent with using Twitter to communicate with students and to build community and to develop leadership programs with social media. It'll just become part of the norm.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I guess along that same vein, in the current day and age, how do you see social media being adopted by student affairs and institutions of higher education? Because, in the recent past, it's been a way to disseminate information. Mm-hmm. And, based on, NASPA and the other ACPA conferences and things like that, strategic plans and engagement and things of that nature are starting to come more to the forefront. So how do you see social media being adopted?
Well, I think one of the questions, as I read it, was sort of how's it being used in higher ed overall, and obviously advancement, communications, marketing folks tend to grab onto this stuff early on and use it. But again, Leslie on the show was talking about sort of the adoption or emergence of new functional areas within student affairs, and the emergence of student affairs technology directors or communication folks. And I think that once those functional areas become sort of more ingrained into our profession, then you'll have people sort of overseeing the mission and strategy of the entire unit with regards to how they're using social media in their strategic communications.
Yeah.
And it'll be much more strategic, because right now it's you have a student in your office who enjoys communicating via Twitter or blogging or using Facebook in a sort of developmental way. They're the ones that end up doing it for your office or your unit, and then if they leave, who picks it up? Exactly.
Okay. So again, it's talking about that that integration and the building the positions for the effective utilization of these technologies.
Exactly. I mean, we're kind of at the beginning. It's definitely in its infancy in student affairs, and it's going to be exciting to see what happens, because as people realize that these tools are no longer just a fad, they are part of the fabric of society, at least in the United States, with higher education for communications. And it's not just one way. It's that whole aspect of building and creating community and creating connections and relationships and using it to develop yourself professionally, and professional development through social media is a huge emerging area within student affairs.
Okay. All right. This is kind of one of the heavy hitters you were talking about. But what is your ideal strategic plan for the deployment of social media in student affairs?
My ideal strategic plan.
So maybe 3 channels that you think would be most effectively served by social media.
Sure. Well, when you say channels, are you talking about the tools, or are you talking about sort of 3 areas within student affairs?
More the tools, I guess.
Well, it depends on sort of, I guess, your office or your unit, but clearly Facebook is the front runner when it comes to sort of critical mass and the most amount of users in that space. Facebook is at the top, regardless of what you're doing, because a Facebook page can be a way that you can interact with your community, interact with your students, and do a lot of different things. I mean, the day is coming, I predict, where you will have students applying to schools through an app that runs in Facebook. It's going to happen. The other thing would be obviously Twitter, because Twitter, it's the kind of thing where it's impossible to describe Twitter in a really short burst of sentences, because it's like trying to describe a Swiss Army knife, and it has 72 different tools, and all of them have their own unique function. And Twitter is very much like that. It seems very simple, but oftentimes the most simple things can be used in very complex ways, in very meaningful ways. So I would say Facebook and Twitter for sure. And then that's where it starts to sort of differentiate a little bit, because if you're in career services, LinkedIn can be an amazing tool, because LinkedIn you can have recommendations, you can get a lot of data about companies in terms of just the educational attainment that each company has. I mean, the data that's out there on LinkedIn is really impressive, and a lot of people haven't really explored LinkedIn as much as they could. And of course, YouTube is an awesome way to put content out there, because you can put up something that is dynamic and it showcases something in a multimedia way that you just can't do with text. And the other nice thing with YouTube is you can add captions, which means you can make it very accessible. And according to, I believe I think it's some Gartner research around the adoption of mobile optimized devices for getting online. I want to say 2014 or 2018. People will be getting online in greater numbers via mobile devices than they will be via desktop computers. And so the nice thing about something like YouTube or Facebook or Twitter is those sites are extremely mobile optimized, because they realize this is what's coming.
Okay. Yeah, and actually you touched on one of the interesting points from my academic and like conference type career. This year, the studentaffairs.com case study was on
the virtual case study.
Yeah, it was on the development of a strategic plan for social media and for a specific office in a student affairs division. And we actually looked at the development of Facebook applications for matching employers to employable candidates for a career services office. So something along those lines. And I think that you definitely touched on some of the key points that I was looking for you to get on. So
glad I could hit the things that you need to sort of fill in the blanks. I would say there's, for example, the schools app on Facebook from Integral is being adopted by schools. I'm working on a story right now for Inside Higher Ed about a school that's going to be, they're mostly online, but they're going to use the schools app to sort of recreate that sort of traditional campus feel, because you don't have a quad, you don't have a union for people to meet up and create connections, but we know that connections and community allows for further opportunities for engagement, which helps to retain students and makes the student experience much more rewarding and rich. And so the schools app is a great way for, especially online schools, to build a place for students to get together and gather. Another thing that I've recently come across is roommate matching. There's companies out there that use Facebook to match up people so that they can get them talking early to see, hey, if you're going to be my roommate in the residence halls, let's start talking now.
Yeah.
And maybe we have similar hobbies, similar likes, that kind of thing. And it's only going to grow as more and more people realize the value of connecting with students in that space, because it's no longer a student space. Facebook is everybody's space now.
Yep.
And it's you've got businesses there, you've got individuals, groups, clubs, you name it. It's the gathering place for pretty much everything.
Yeah. Let's see. We kind of touched on this with the previous question, but some of the roles that you see various social media channels being able to serve, and what channels or services do you see as not yet being fully utilized by student affairs and that have a great deal of potential for student affairs?
Sure. Well, I think in the campus auxiliary services area, there's a lot of potential for the marketing of services, because it's about, for example, coffee shops. Sometimes the coffee shops don't have the best coffee, but they have the best sense of community, and they have the best sense of, hey, this is where I come because I know I'm going to enjoy myself, and they're familiar faces, that type of thing. So you take that kind of model and you say, what can auxiliaries do to create more of a sense of connection, more of a sense of community? And they could be, using Twitter, using Facebook. A lot of schools are actually, they're in their auxiliaries, especially with dining services, offering incentives. There's also things like location-based services, Foursquare, Facebook Places, Scavenger. Schools are using these tools to allow students to sort of get into that game-based mentality of where they check in and they get something for it, or there's a tip that they can read and learn about something. It's great for campus tours as well, sort of the admissions visitor center folks.
Yeah.
And so, there's always sort of two sides to this, right? There's the student development aspect of these tools and what you can do to say, okay, here's our outcome, our desired outcome, and here's what we're going to do to reach it, and here's the tools we're going to use. But there's also sort of that marketing communication side too, and I think that it's easy to split that up. Admissions folks, clearly admissions and social media are made to be together. You've got students blogging about their experiences on campus, and it's a great way for them to feel connected, or for prospective students to feel connected when they read that blog post, or when they watch that YouTube interview of a current student.
Okay, excellent. All right. Let's see, and this kind of leads into our last couple question sections. But who do you feel has the most to gain from social media use in student affairs or higher education? Is it the academic sector? Is it the student affairs sector? Is it the students, and why?
Wow! So I'll get out my crystal ball here. Who has the most to gain? Well, I think our students have the most to gain. I mean, at the end of the day, higher education is about providing a learning experience either in the classroom or outside the classroom for students. And social media is a way that we can enhance that and improve upon it. It can lead to greater opportunities for learning. It can lead to increased outcomes with regards to student services programming. And so I think the folks who are going to benefit the most are going to be our students. Okay. And it's up to us as professionals, regardless of sort of academic affairs or student affairs, it's up to us to make the best of what's out there, because you said it earlier, we're a little behind. There's a bit of lag sometimes with higher education and looking into sort of new or innovative technologies, and I think that it's up to us to continue looking at these technologies to see how best we can serve our students.
Okay. All right, now we're going to kind of move into one of the facets of that recent question, but questions surrounding academia and in the classroom. What's the best example of social media implementation that you've seen in the classroom, and what set it apart from other efforts?
So see, now you're exposing my sort of like my softer areas, right? The classroom. I don't do a lot with the classroom. I mean, to be honest, most of what I do is student affairs communications. And while student affairs practitioners are in the classroom teaching a lot, I would say, folks like Tanya Justin, she's in Wisconsin. I think she's at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I just found out she's writing a book for Josie Bass on, I think the title is, it's either social media in higher education or higher education in social media. And her focus, though, is more academic affairs in the classroom. So I would say, look for the folks who are in the sort of the more academic affairs, social media oriented spaces. People who are in centers for sort of teaching and learning, the CETLs, those centers for education, teaching and learning folks. This is sort of their wheelhouse, right? This is what they do, because a lot of people have used blogs to create spaces for students to put in reflective comments or to post things. I've seen a lot of professors do that, where there's a group blog and students, as part of their learning, they post their reflections about what they're getting out of the class or about a specific topic, and then their peers can comment on that. And so it creates sort of greater layers of the opportunity for folks to learn. Okay. But again, it's the sort of like saying, can you do this similar stuff with a Blackboard or a desire to learn, a course management system? And sometimes the answer is yes. And so I would say, again, it goes back to, if you look at the tools first, it's not gonna work so well as if you say, okay, what are we trying to do? It comes back to, when you're creating a syllabus, what are the learning outcomes for the class, for the students in the class, that type of thing, and then you say, okay, are we going to reach those learning outcomes using X, Y, Z? And it's sort of like cooking, right? You've got your recipe of things, your ingredients, and you pick and choose. And there are tons of schools using Facebook for classes, for student affairs. I mean, it's almost now it's no longer saying like who's doing it the best. It's sort of like saying who isn't doing it, because there's a lot of people that are.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you actually transition into the next question quite well. But do you think that social media and all its different iterations will eventually be able to replace or be a substitute for some of the bigger commercial options for online classrooms like the Blackboards and the D2Ls and things of that nature? Do you think that those might go away or just because of social media?
Well, I don't think they're going to go away anytime soon. I think that because of privacy issues and confidentiality and things like grading, until someone comes up with a sort of a hook into Facebook that allows you to connect your student information system, which is your grading data, your course data, into it in a confidential way, I don't see it happening, because that's where Blackboard and Desire to Learn, I mean, schools have spent a lot of money on these platforms,
yes.
And they're not going to just say, well, okay, Facebook's here now, we're just going to go there. Because the other thing too is, while Blackboard, D2L and some of the open source stuff, Moodle, they make changes, they make updates to their services. They don't just sort of rewrite everything overnight like Facebook does every now and again. And I think that the functionality that you see in social media spaces will probably get implemented in various ways into the CMS. And there might be some back and forth. You could like something in your class on Facebook, but it's the like button within your Blackboard when you're logged into Blackboard. And so I think there's going to be a lot more integration, because all you ever hear about is people saying that I wish I could do this, I wish I could do that. And I think that they're going to sort of cherry pick the best features of social media sites like Facebook into these tools. But I don't see them disappearing anytime soon, because again, these are large enterprise systems. There's a lot of investment in them, and someday Facebook's going to get hacked. I mean, Mark Greenfield was talking about this online, and he was saying it's not a question of if, it's a matter of when. And I think that it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I think Blackboard, D2L, these things are more secure because it's customized to your campus. So security is a major factor in this, because you don't want information that is covered under FERPA to be out there sort of for anybody to see. Because there's already enough sort of accidents that happen already with people forgetting laptops in their car with everybody's social security number on it, that type of thing.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Let's see. What opportunities do you see for faculty to engage students through social media? I know we talked briefly about Ray Junko and his research, and I've actually contacted him and going to communicate with him as I move forward in publication with my thesis and things of that nature. But just wonder what opportunities you saw for faculty engagement through social media.
Well, I think the opportunities are immense, first of all, because again, it's that initial learning curve. And so I think you've got faculty who in a lot of different disciplines are still, they themselves, getting knowledgeable of these tools. Because one of the issues is you can't figure out what you're going to do with it for your class, for the learning that you hope to take place, until you know how to use it, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's that sort of initial ramping up that's going to happen, where faculty, they're going to start to hear from their peers. Their peers are going to drive this. It's going to happen in the sense of, so-and-so is a good friend of mine, a trusted colleague, they're using it, and this is what they did with it, and then it just kind of steamrolls after that. So I think the opportunities are immense, because you hear about professors in rhetoric, composition, communications, marketing, business, the sort of early adopter spaces.
Yeah.
They're doing things. But what about other areas? What about sort of the liberal arts, philosophy, sociology, science, math? I mean, there's so many different things that can be done, and I think it's just a question of, once the experts in the field get to a point where they feel that they have a certain level of expertise or of trust in the platforms, then they'll go forward and they'll create some really innovative things.
Okay, cool. All right, let's see. So now we're going to kind of switch gears from academia and move into the student affairs and student services realm. And you've mentioned a couple of things already, but which, individual departments within student affairs, be it career services, counseling, campus rec, student activities, do you think have the most to gain from, social media or a specific channel in social media?
Sure. Well, I think sort of all of them would be the default answer.
Yeah.
Right? As a consultant, it behooves me to say that everybody can get something out of it. It's sort of like saying, is the internet useful for everyone? Well, in many different ways it is, right? So, in terms of functional areas, I'll start off with, it's like a disability access services. Accessing social media, especially Facebook right now, for folks with disabilities is not very easy. It's not a treat at all because Facebook uses a lot of inaccessible code. However, they recently put out a call for a position for sort of an accessibility person at Facebook. There's accessible Twitter, which is a great way to access Twitter if you're using a screen reader. It's much more accessible. So I think, we always want to make sure that when we talk about all the different cool things that we can do with social media, we always go back to, can everybody use it?
Yep.
With YouTube, you want to have captions. With Twitter, you want to use the services that are accessible. Same thing with Facebook. And so, how could it, for example, how could a disability access services unit use social media? Well, once you get it ramped up to a way that it's accessible for students, it's just like any other unit or area on campus using social media to communicate with students. Providing accessible videos as opposed to having videos out there that aren't accessible. Providing feeds of content that are accessible. Blogs, for example, are a great form of social media that are almost extremely accessible out of the gate. For example, a WordPress blog is extremely optimized for search engines, which also means it's really good for screen readers, and it's kind of a nice little win-win there. In other areas, career services, LinkedIn's a clear sort of connection for them. But again, it's Twitter, it's Facebook, it's what's your public identity, your brand that students are creating now, a brand online. You don't have to call it a brand, but maybe it's their online identity, and these are going to be the things that their employers search for, or graduate schools when they apply to grad schools. That they're going to look for this. They're going to say, okay, are they on Facebook? And how are they portraying themselves? Are they, putting stuff up there that you wouldn't want to see? Admissions is a great space for social media, just the whole communication sphere. Enrollment management as a whole, because financial aid units can communicate with students all the time about financial aid issues, and there's a lot of them. Registering for classes has sort of long been an issue at a lot of places. Dean of students, crisis communications, when something happens on campus, the Dean of Students office is a lot of times your contact point for that. Maybe it's swine flu, it's meningitis, it's bed bugs, it's a death on campus. It's all that, and so that you could use social media as a way to get the word out, because guess what? There's not one silver bullet, right? It's not just one way to communicate with students, and so it's using all these tools to get the word out about things. Student conduct. I mean, we could go through every functional area and make connections strategically to how social media could be used. Because again, these tools are effective ways to build community, create connections, and to communicate things, which spans the entire breadth of what we do in student affairs.
Okay. And so many, you spoke of crisis management. So many, campuses have the emergency voicemail, the emergency text message, and all that stuff that goes out. But because those systems get so bogged down when it's trying to send, 10,000 text messages or 10,000 voicemails, that a lot of times they don't go through for hours. And so,
no, I think you hit on it, right? Because it's when something goes down, let's say you've got a shooter on campus.
Yeah.
You want to get the word out as quickly as possible, but you also want to get the word out to as many places as you can, because I don't have my phone with me, but I'm on Facebook on my laptop, or I'm checking Twitter right now, and oh my gosh, I just refreshed my stream, and I read that from the Dean of Students office at my university that there's something going down. And maybe I didn't get the text message because maybe I wasn't signed up for that, because it's hard to get everybody to sign up for everything.
Yes, it is.
But at least if one of those messages gets through, that's all that matters.
Yep. All right. All right. Let's see here. So, talked about it earlier in our interview, but social media, in student affairs and higher education has long been used as just, a message board, a place for offices to, give information. We have a dance party going on, in 2 days, and here's where it's going to be. No follow up. How do you think it would be best to, change this perspective from a student's point of view? Because, they see, okay, the Dean of Students Office or Student Activities Board has this Twitter account, and all it does is post information.
Right. You mean it's the equivalent of fluorescent pink paper on a bulletin board.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily doing much more than that. So I think that the next step in the evolution of this is folks like Ken Elmore, who is the Dean of Students at Boston University. Ken tweets at Dean Elmore.
Yep.
And he does a terrific job of engaging his community, saying, hey, I'm a real person just like you, and I have hopes and dreams and thoughts about a variety of topics, and I'm going to tweet about them. I'm not just going to send you about different events that we're hosting. He'll put event information out there, or maybe, hey, look at this video for the class gift, that type of thing. But he's also interacting with the community, saying, hey, you got into BU, that's awesome. Or I'm going to be in California talking to some alums next week. Come join us at the following location. So he's really creating the sense of community. He's building the brand of BU in a space that is extremely accessible to a lot of people. So again, it's not just a broadcast medium. I think that's the over sort of arching theme here, is that it's a way to communicate back and forth with one-to-one or one-to-many or many-to-many. And I think that when you start to do that, that's when the value of this really starts to just explode, and you get to see it and you can recognize it.
Okay. Excellent. So it's not so much just spewing forth information, but it's being a two-way or multi-way communication channel.
Exactly. I mean, it's the thing with forums, for example, online forums have been around for a very long time, and with some communities have been extremely successful, but they're always sort of seen as probably more of like a niche to just the geeks of the world. But I think social media has sort of taken the forums or message boards mentality and given it a space for all to sort of embrace it and to see it as valuable. And again, it's that whole Swiss Army knife aspect. There's so many different things you can do with it, so that how I use social media is not going to be the same way that you use it, and how one student affairs unit or department or division uses it is not going to be the same as the next place. And I think that's the beauty in it, because it's just a communications and connections.
Right. So last question, and then we can discuss some of those things. But what implications do you think social media has for the body of student development theory, and what outcomes can student affairs practitioners set as their goals for the utilization of social media?
I've been thinking about this one because I've seen some tweets from some folks who are getting their PhD, and they're starting to kick around the idea of student development theory has been around for a while, and we've all read the sort of the main book out there, the Evans text on student development theory. But this was written prior to the existence of social media, prior to the existence of really the web in general, right? A lot of the theory that we utilize as practitioners, it's pre-internet, and it's so it's pre-internet, pre-social media, pre all these tools. And I think sometimes folks will try to take existing student development theory and sort of smush in social media into it. And I honestly think we're going to have to create some new paradigms of theory. We're going to have to create, obviously building upon the past research, because there's value in that, but at the same time sort of blowing things open and saying, well, if you had to start from scratch, what would that look like? Because I was talking to a friend who's a professor and an instructor, and she, how she teaches her class, and students aren't allowed to have their cell phones out or their laptops out. And I said, well, there's different cultural norms now with incoming students, especially traditionally aged students, around how they learn and how they bring technology into the classroom versus the sort of cultural norms, expectations of an instructor or professor. And so from a student affairs perspective, from a student development perspective, student development is changing. And we have to come up with new theories. We have to come up with new research. And again, though, it has to be solid research, because I think with social media, it's such a buzzword right now, and it's such an easy thing to sort of say, we're doing research around student development and social media, and everybody pays attention in large part because it has social media attached to it. So I think it's important to continue to create really sound research and methodologies as we sort of create new theories, because honestly, the existing theories, unless you look at something simple like a challenge and support, which then you could probably apply social media to it quite easily, they're just not going to hold up over time. Eventually, because people change, people evolve. The way we develop as learners and as citizens, it changes and it grows.
Yeah. So basically, the theories need to change, and the theories need to either evolve or completely be revamped and rewritten, is what I'm gathering, right?
It's tricky to talk about it, right? Because there's a lot of people who have long-term ownership in these things, these theories, and it's sort of like saying we're going to change, the foundation. And foundational stuff is hard to change, right? That's why jackhammers exist.
Yeah.
And so, the sort of academic equivalent of a jackhammer is loud, and it's not necessarily going to be easy.
Yeah.
However, for example, I'm having a show next week on social media and professionalism. And one of the things we're going to talk about is privacy. And I think that privacy is a social construct, right? We created privacy. People have defined what privacy is and what it isn't. And with student development theory, well, we basically said, as a profession, we're going to accept these as our sort of way of being and as the pillars of what we do. And so now when you're starting to say, well, we might change that, we might alter that's going to be, it's going to cause some anxiety with some folks. So I think as more and more student affairs practitioners become adept and develop their expertise with social media as part of their own professional development, as part of the work that they do to make their offices more efficient and just to better serve their students, especially in this financial climate that we exist in right now. We can't afford to be inefficient in any way, and we have to retain students, and we have to continue to show that what we do has value. And if we're not creating theories that are modern in a way, then what's going to happen is we're going to look like we're outdated and like we're outmoded, and that we don't have a reason to continue.
Yeah. All right. So the theories have got to change just as the students are changing.
Exactly. I mean, when's the last time you read a new student development theory that was widely accepted by the profession and not necessarily accepted but adopted in our use? And it hasn't happened for a long time.
Yeah, and it's the new student populations that they're just starting to get literature out about, that the millennials, the GLBTQ community is just now getting foundational developmental theories out there, and and they keep trying to relate them back to the foundational theories, the Chickerings, the Sanfords, the Perrys, and everything. But I'm feeling like
the Schlossbergs, Well, and again, too, I think it's important to point this out. A lot of those theories, when they ran their research, it was on traditionally aged, white, heterosexual male students in many spaces. And the traditional student is no longer, right? You've got an older population of students. You've got predicted to be, in our lifetime, white folks will be in the minority in the United States. Student development theorists at the time when they were doing their work, that was not on their radar. That was not present in their work. The technologies that we have today didn't exist. And so you've got shifting demographics, you've got shifting degrees of educational attainment, you've got new technologies, and again, it's time to revamp and rethink our theories and include what's happening right now.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, I think we closed on a pretty heavy but good note. Saying that change has got to happen for the persistence and relevancy of student affairs and everything. So I think we hit all my questions out of the park, and
Okay.
you know, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity. And if there's any other questions that you have for me or anything like that for the broadcast.
Well, I think that I'm just excited by the fact that there's folks out there doing research in social media and student affairs, because it used to be if you were the technology person and a student affair, you were sort of the student affairs techie. You were
Yeah,
sort of seen as the aberration. You were seen as this sort of unique creature, right, in the world. And I think that nowadays it's sort of saying, yeah, no, this is cool. This is fine. This is actually a really neat space to be in because there's a lot of value here and it's the future.
yeah,
And I'm appreciative of the fact that you've created a thesis, and when that comes out, I want to read it. It's the more data driven research that we've got out there on student affairs and social media, the better, because we don't have that much, and we need more, and we need a variety of voices doing it.